I want to tell you a little story about the day my heart broke open. It was my first retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh. That was about 45 years ago. And it wasn't what I expected. It was a silent retreat. But at one point, a group of people in the Sangha were singing a song called Dear Friends, which is a song in the Plum Village tradition. It's a Quaker song, but in the Plum Village tradition, this is a song that's often sung during retreats. And during the time that this song was being sung, I guess because it felt like such a safe place, the defenses around my heart completely evaporated. They just dropped. Now, we all have defenses around our heart for various reasons, hurts or fear, contraction. We want to protect our heart if we've been betrayed or hurt in some ways as a child or later. And all those defenses completely dropped. And what happened was that I felt everything that I had sort of resisted and repressed during my entire life of any kind of pain or suffering of anyone in the world, like watching the news and seeing, children starving in Biafra or somebody, losing a son or different things that happen on the news, that I was able to watch this because my heart wasn't fully open. In other words, I wasn't aware that all those beings are me and feeling the suffering of all of them. But when the defenses dropped, that's what happened. I felt the suffering of everyone in the world, and it was overwhelming. All I could do was cry. I felt like I didn't know what was happening. I was having a nervous breakdown or something. But I felt all the pain and suffering of everyone in the world, past, present, and future. It was overwhelming to me. An interesting thing happened. As when we were done and I was, crying, I couldn't really control the crying. So I went and sat down. We were by a pond. It was a mega institute in upstate New York where the retreat was being held. And I, left the group and I went and sat down by myself on the shore of this pond. And, I didn't want to, I was not in a good way. I was totally sobbing and I felt uncomfortably being around people, seeing me break down in this way. So I went there and I was sitting by the pond, and on the other end of the pond, there was this huge white swan. No other ducks or anything were there, no other swans, just this huge swan. And the swan started moving towards me in the water, swimming towards me. And then at some point it came to the shore and it got out of the water and it kept walking towards me. And eventually it came right up to me and it put its head, a swan has a very long neck, and it put its head on my lap and just stayed there. I mean, I was completely not resisting anything. So the swan came up, and that's just something that happened. I mean, I was overwhelmed by all the suffering in the world. So, I noticed that this was happening, but it didn't even seem strange to me. But the people behind me, it was a silent retreat, but the people behind me were very disturbed by it. They were thinking what's going on with the swan? It must be sick. There must be something wrong. Maybe we should talk to a veterinarian or something to find out what's wrong with the swan. Swans don't do something like that. I didn't know anything about swans, so I wasn't thinking that, but the swan had its head on my lap, and I just put my hand on its head, and it was as if it was comforting me in a way, it felt like. So I was happy to have the swan do this. And then eventually I got up, and the swan went back in the water and went away. And for the rest of the retreat was 5 days long, and for the rest of the retreat I was just sobbing all the time. I just felt this every news story that I had ever seen in my entire life that had some suffering in it, and many of them do, wars and all kinds of things going on, I was feeling the suffering of all those beings. I'd been able to repress it and just watch it. This is the news, and now the weather, or now sports, and then I would go on to whatever that was. But evidently my mind had held all those things, and now I was feeling all of it. So I was feeling everything that I'd repressed, and I was feeling what was going on all over the world that somehow I could just feel. And so I could not stop crying. The whole retreat, the slightest thing, I would break down crying. And it was very uncomfortable, to say the least. I had no idea what was happening. So afterwards, I asked some people. Nobody really understood it. They said, like, oh, your stuff comes up. And I was feeling like, my stuff? Yeah, my stuff is like one grain of sand in the Sahara Desert. I'm feeling everything. That they couldn't understand. They just thought this was my stuff that was coming up. And my stuff was coming up too, but it was so small compared to the magnitude of everyone that it was almost something I wasn't even considering or aware of. And finally, after a week or so, I called up a friend of mine who later became a Dharma teacher, Sue Bridge, wonderful woman. And I told her what had happened, and she just said, "Isn't it wonderful?" That was it. "Isn't it wonderful?" And in that moment, I totally understood. It was exactly the right thing to say to me, and it was wonderful. Before that, I didn't realize it was wonderful. I thought it was something horrible. But as soon as she said that, I realized what had happened, that my heart had broken open, that I'd had all this defenses and armor around it, and all that had just dropped. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful that that happened. And this was 45 years ago. And the defenses never really came back again. I just stayed with my heart open like this. I could feel what was going on in other people. I could feel what was happening in the world. That never really changed. And this song always reminds me of that, because that's when it happened. Now, this song was sung at every retreat, and I was at many retreats over a period of 45 years, many different retreats, and always this song was sung. And I didn't break down crying each time I heard it. That was only during the first time, but my heart was open. My heart was open to it. And what I needed, what we all really need, is a safe place to let these defenses down. Because we're really trying to protect our heart. We think our heart is small. We think our heart is limited. And if that were so, then it would be good to protect it. It's precious. It's our love, and we don't want to lose that. It's very important to protect it. Very important to protect it. It's precious. It's the most precious thing that we have. And so if it were small and limited, like this body, then it would be good to make defenses and protect it, if that were even possible. But the truth is that our heart is infinite. It has no limits whatsoever. It's infinite. And by my heart breaking open and the defenses falling away, because they were no longer needed. Our heart is infinite. It contains everything that exists. Everything exists in our heart. All beings exist in our heart. When we believe that we're a separate person, a separate individual self with a limited lifespan, and that it's creates a lot of suffering in us. It's very hard to be in the world as this idea of a limited separate self. When we awaken, that idea, that identity of a separate self dissolves, just like the defenses around my heart did. That ends. And when that ends, we open up into realizing what we are, that we are infinite and we are everything, and nothing is separate from us. So there is no longer an identity. There's no separate being to have an identity. There is just the totality of all that exists, and before all that exists. And that's the true awakening, to awaken before anything has existed, completely beyond the dream, before the dream. That's samadhi. There's nothing yet here. Nothing exists yet. But this beingness that we are, that's the source of everything. So in the dream itself, when we enter back into the dream, we enter as the totality, as everything, because since we're the source of everything, we are everything. And in that we realize that our heart is completely infinite, that it contains everything that exists. But having it break open like that was how that happened. I didn't understand that. I didn't have a clue what had happened until my friend Sue said, "Isn't it wonderful?" In those words was the realization of the infinite nature of what I am. And the breaking of the heart was part of that. So it's not always easy in the awakening process because we have this armor. This sense of a separate self is a type of armor against reality, an armor against our true nature. And so we all do that. Because if we were a separate self, then we're precious, right? You don't want to die. We want to keep this body going and all that. But when we realize what we really are, everything changes. So I did record this song in gratitude for what had happened, and also as a form of puja, as a form of an offering to all the teachers that have helped me over the years and have become me, and who I'm not separate from Thich Nhat Hanh to Ramana Maharshi, and really infinite numbers of teachers, because all of it is in me. I'm constantly learning from everything, and everything is becoming me, or is me. I'm realizing the oneness of all of it. So there's no separation between me and Thich Nhat Hanh, or Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta, Buddha, Jesus, any of the teachers I've had, or any of the people that I've met. My family and friends, my children, all of that is in me, in this. Just as much as my fingers and toes, Thich is here, Ramana is here. There's no separation of me, Peter, Chaitanya, and Thich, or Ramana, or Buddha, or Hitler, or anyone else. It's all in me. It all is me. Every cell of my body is this combination of all these different things, and what's before all of it. So I recorded this song, remembering from the very first time that I'd heard it, in gratitude and devotion to all my teachers. It felt like something to do as an offering. So I offer this also to you. This song, Dear Friends. It's a Quaker song that was taken into Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village tradition. Many people come to these retreats, not just Buddhists. So there's Catholic nuns, many people that I've met, Quakers, who resonate with Thich Nhat Hanh and his teachings, come there. So one of the things that were shared was this Quaker song, and that became a very important part of the Sangha meetings, Dear Friends. So I offer this song also to you. None of us are separate from anything or anyone else. And maybe you can feel that in this song. So the song is called Dear Friends. I'll try and put it at the end of this video, but if I can't figure out how to do this, it's on YouTube, and I'll put an instruction, or I'll put it on my website so that you can play it after the end of this video, explaining why I did this song and how important this song has been to my spiritual path. Not just the song, but everything that's happened. But the song was a big moment where these defenses fell away. Thank you, my friend. Enjoy.